This rope is the only thing between me and disaster at all times. It is what holds my $500,000 lobster boat in place, which is my livelihood. As you can see, it's in pretty rough shape. We gotta get it fixed. This is really heavy. And the crazy part is that rope is just one of many examples of small things all over this boat that make it work. At first glance, these small items seem unimportant and cheap, but they all lead to making the whole boat and the whole operation work. Some of the cheapest, smallest items on this boat are extremely important, all the way down to 50-cent fuses. We'll kind of showcase the not so glamorous and the not so fun side of the industry. A lot of my videos share with you the fun parts, the cool catches, and the exciting moments. I think that gives you a false sense of what it's like to be a lobster fisherman. So before we even start fixing the rope, I want to get some heat on the boat because it's been extremely cold and the boat is not winterized. So I'm a little nervous that it's frozen. The temperature is 30 degrees. Salt water freezes at 28, so we should be okay. Before I start it, I'm going to get some heat on the boat. Once again, it is still cold here in Maine. It hasn't warmed up yet, so I'm going to continue complaining about it. So if the boats freeze too hard, they can actually crack a manifold or do some damage to the motor. We're not that cold yet. Usually we try to winterize the boat if it's gonna get that cold. Mostly what I'm concerned about is if there's any ice caught in the impeller. The impeller is actually on the note of small items throughout the boat that are important. The impeller is probably a good one. The whole motor relies on this little, I don't even know what they are, maybe a couple $100, and it is a very critical piece of the boat, which is why I'm taking a little extra caution to put some heat on it before I start the boat. Oh, that heat feels nice. I might just stand here for a couple more minutes. There goes my eyelashes. All right. Make sure it's not too hot. This is the impeller right here. This is where the water comes in from the ocean. This is where the impeller is. It pumps the water into the motor, right into the manifold right here. We'll let it warm up while we fix the rope. So here is the impeller. There's a spline inside of it with some gears. And the motor spins the impeller. These blades pull the water through. They play a critical role in keeping this boat running. Without this, the motor burns up. One of the most important pieces on the boat. Depending on the time of the year or the temperature, this is the most important part of the boat right here. The trusty heater. If it's summertime, it's not that important, but tomorrow morning it's gonna be important. In the past few days we've hauled, it's been extremely important. This has been my seat. And one of the pieces that I'm gonna show you later in this video is literally only a $2 piece, and if it breaks, which it has, then it leaves us completely stranded and dead at sea, and we have to get towed home by another boat. A lot of these parts we try to keep stocked on the boat, but there's only so much that we can keep and prepare for when we have literally thousands of pieces that could go wrong. So sit back, relax. I'm going to show you some cheap and important things on the boat, and I'm also going to show you some expensive and important things on the boat as we go through and do some checks and some maintenance that I usually try to do once a month or so. So as you can see, the old one is in pretty rough shape. It's getting chafed up over time. These ones, they should have chafing gear on them also. I didn't have any chafing gear. Once we put the new one on, I'll probably put something on it to protect it a little bit from chafing, because in the storms, they saw back and forth in what's called the chocks up there on the front of the boat. They're the guide that holds the rope in place. And where that guide lays, it saws back and forth during the storms, and actually during bad storms, this is where most of them break off. They'll saw so hard and it's blowing so hard that you can't get out to your boats to help them, and they end up sawing off right in the chocks. That's why I was getting nervous about this one. Where it lays in the chocks is actually right here, and you can see how bad a shape that rope is. A lot of it's actually already coming off.
Looks like a bad haircut.
So let's get the new one built. Make sure she stays safe during these windy days. Somewhere in this boat is a rope burner that we can't seem to find, because everything is scattered throughout this boat. Winter fishing tends to make a messy boat. The motivation to clean it kind of goes out the window, and we're not on it often. We just want to get off of it. So when we come out to haul right now, we're just coming out to haul the traps and get home. Whereas when we're on the boat every day in the summer, we keep it much cleaner. So we gotta get it cleaned up today, and I'm sure that during the cleaning process we'll come across the rope burner.
We got our buoy burner.
Yeah, we got the brander. Woof. I don't know if you can smell that or not, but that is strong. Ow, and that is hot. I'm gonna make a pretty big loop on this end. See if I can remember how to do this. We make the size of the loop we want, and if this comes out right, there will be no knot here. It'll just be smooth, it'll look like one piece of rope, and it'll look like the loop is made right into the rope. So this is 1, 2, and 3, and the first step is to take number 1, open this rope up, send it through. I don't know, it's been a few years since I've done this. And this rope is extra hard to splice because it's so soft. All right, so we sent number 1 through. So this is the part of why it's important to have the ends burned, because passing this through, if it's frayed out, is really hard. Try to keep it tight and neat as you go. There's the first knot. Step 2 is to flip it over now and find the ones that they come through. So this one comes through here. The one that's right on top of it, we go back through. Wait, oh, I'm rusty. We don't go back through that one, do we? Thought this was gonna be like riding a bike.
This is weird for me to see because you can tie a knot like no other.
This is how I learn anyway. You learn by figuring it out, right? If somebody told you that, no, number one had to go through this one, I'd be like, oh, okay. And then I would never remember it again. But if you figure it out on your own, then it sticks. Yeah, okay, this looks right now. Now you're only supposed to have to do 3 on each side, and that's supposed to make the splice actually stronger than the rope itself. The good thing is the lobsters don't really care what this looks like. There's a saying on fancy shiny boats, and it goes, chrome don't get you home. And it basically means no matter how pretty your stuff is, at the end of the day, that pretty stuff isn't what gets the job done. So now we got the splice on the bottom end. We got to put another loop on the top end to hook on the bit that actually holds the boat. So this one will have a few more eyes on it than the other one. Take what I learned on the bottom one and apply it to the top one. Start with the side that doesn't get as many eyes first. Keeping each one tight is critical if you really want to make it look good. The new pennant is done, it's ready to go. We got 1 loop on the top, 1 loop on the bottom. Now we just gotta go hook it up to the chain and the boat. As you can see, it didn't come out terribly for not splicing for a long time. I won't show you too close-up shots, but you can see it kind of tries to follow the lay of the rope. If you chase these ropes up, you can see if it's done right, they continually keep wrapping right up around. And it just looks like the rope gets bigger as it goes, so it's smooth, catch-free, no knots. As the boat pulls on it and tightens it up, it'll look more natural. Before we can put the new pennant on, we gotta get the boat running because we're currently hanging off the old one and it's blowing pretty hard. And if we let go of the old one, we're gonna have a fight on our hands to try to get the new one on. So we're gonna get the boat running, pull it up to the co-op, come back in the skiff and hook up the new pennant. Hopefully she'll start. It's nice and warm down here. 36 degrees. So we're gonna fire her up, hopefully, and I'm also still being cautious of that little rubber impeller. As soon as I start it, I'm gonna run back and make sure there's actually water coming out the exhaust, because the exhaust is where that impeller actually sends water. So if it is froze or if there's anything wrong with the impeller, the first sign of it is that there's no water coming out the exhaust. So cross your fingers, she'll start. The batteries could be dead. Oh, we do have to turn the power on though.
The main power switch.
The main power switch. Here we go. Got it. Let's go make sure she's pumping. The hose is not froze, that's good. She is pumping. The impeller was not froze up, or at least it's not now. There's the top shackle to the mooring. All right. Well, this is the pretty side. We want this side up top. Hold on.
Us ugly ones need loving too, Jacob.
Okay. Loop to tie the skiff into. Speaking of skiff, we got to replace the rope on the skiff also because that's going bad after a long winter. I spent the morning gathering up the skiff, which broke the rope during the last windstorm and it floated away. Luckily, a buddy was nearby and watched it happen, and he went out and rescued it for me and brought it into a nearby dock and drive it what felt like an hour with that trolling motor. Thought I was going to freeze to death. So with the skiff breaking free, I figured that might be a sign to come down and fix the rope on the boat that I've been putting off as well. And now I guess it's time to fix this one as well. My skiff might not look like much to you, but it's sentimental. I'll probably run this skiff until it can't run any longer, and then I'll probably fix it up and then run it a little bit longer because it's my grandfather's skiff who fished out of this harbor on this same mooring that we're repairing right now. And my grandfather's no longer with us, so kind of a sentimental skiff. If it ever does retire, I'll probably like hang it up in the ceiling of the shop or something, I don't know. When I got a picture of her floating down the harbor, I was pretty nervous. I didn't want to lose the old girl. She's got a lot of good years left in her. Speaking of skiff, it's another small piece of equipment that makes the whole operation operate. Without the skiff, we can't get out to the boat to even go catch lobsters to begin with. The skiff used to be a headache when I ran outboards on it, but since I put the trolling motor on and the battery, it's actually working out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the trolling motor so far.
In case Mercury wants us to test one out, we won't be opposed.
All right, the mooring is done, but the maintenance is not. Probably time for a new balloon too.
Yeah, she's looking a little deflated.
The new mooring is complete. It came out pretty good. I got it a little longer than I wanted to, but I guess maybe that works out fine. As long as we don't have too much harbor ice for the rest of the winter, it will be fine, and it will actually fit the Westmac. So the higher bow on the Westmac, this pennant will be perfect for it. This is a typical day off. Even days off aren't really off because they're either spent at home stressing about stuff on the boat you need to do, or your traps offshore, or they're spent on the boat trying to fix the things that you're stressing about. So it's always on your mind. If you have a boat, you could probably relate. So one of the most important parts, I'm gonna say that a lot. Every one of these parts is the most important part, so bear with me. This is a very important hatch. A lot of important stuff happens back here. So in this hatch is the steering. This is where the rudder is, and the hydraulic dual ram steering that turns the rudder. This is what turns the boat. Therefore, it is the most important piece on the boat. And there's a lot of stuff in here. Usually when we break down, 50% of the time we're coming back here to this hatch to do some inspecting. We got hydraulic hoses that chafe and blow. We got fittings that blow. We got pistons that blow. We got nuts that vibrate loose. We got autopilot indicator back here. The autopilot is the most important part of the boat. After you've had an autopilot in a boat and you try to go without it, it sucks, especially when you're riding an hour to 2 hours offshore and you got to sit there and try to drive the thing straight the whole time. Autopilot, you just click the button. This little gauge here hooks onto the rudder and it tells the computer up in the boat what angle the rudder is facing, and the computer can then keep the boat straight and headed in the direction you want. Allows you to focus more time on the electronics, looking around, making sure everything is safe, or eating some food. So down in the bottom of this is actually where the most important piece is, and this keeps you from sinking. As you can see down here in the bottom, this is a box that clamps onto the shaft that actually is attached to the rudder. So this is what makes the seal for the rudder shaft to be able to come up through the boat without leaking. You can see there are 4 studs that stick up through the box. On top of the studs, they're double nutted on both of them. Those double nuts clamp down some packing onto the shaft and keep it from leaking. The problem is there's a lot of vibration back here in this part of the boat. These double nuts, no matter how tight you get them, they vibrate loose over time. If you don't keep an eye on them, this will start to leak. If it starts to leak and you still don't keep an eye on them, this will sink your boat quicker than most things will. If you'll notice, 2 of them are actually starting to come loose. How these things manage to loosen up is like magic, because they're double nutted and they have to vibrate up, but I guess on a boat, when it involves breaking down, nothing surprises me. Well, all of these are actually a little bit loose and could be used to be tightened up. All right, we shouldn't sink, at least for another month or so. That is the autopilot indicator. They suck so bad when they break. I've had many of them break. These hatches have water running over them constantly. No matter how tight you try to get a hatch, they always leak. Salt water running down over this sensor. These things don't last very long. They're $250 a pop. I know that because I have bought several of them over the past few years. These are the 2 pistons that steer the boat, the fittings, the hoses. Just double check and make sure all of these are tight. Up there is one of the most important parts of the boat. Actually, that was good timing. It just turned on. That's the automatic bilge pump. If something back here starts to leak, that will keep up with it. If that doesn't keep up with it, you're in trouble. The through hull on the outside of the hull is where the water actually shoots out. And if it's extremely cold, the water shooting out of that through hull will freeze as soon as it is exposed to the air, and you'll be left with a big clump of ice on the through hull on the outside of the hull, which plugs the bilge from being able to run. Then the bilge continues trying to pump, even though it can't, and it's an automatic pump, so it's designed to only run when it's underwater. So the pump will continue to try pumping, but it will never get anywhere because the exhaust of the pump is frozen. So the bilge pump will actually keep going until the batteries run dead, and that's usually when you find out you got a leak in your boat. Arguably the most important part of the boat is your diesel fuel tanks. Without diesel fuel, we're not going anywhere. This boat will hold 250 gallons. The new boat's going to hold 500 gallons in each tank, and it's going to burn a little bit more fuel, so that's going to take a little bit of getting used to, but it's also going to go a little bit faster, so that'll be nice. The new boat is also just about to get started on. Within the next 2 or 3 weeks, hopefully they'll be starting to lay the hull up. They're starting from scratch. Super excited to start documenting that and sharing that with you guys. So a few times a year, we try to put some treatment in the diesel fuel because these tanks will actually grow. I don't know how any kind of algae can grow in a tank, but it does. These tanks will actually grow some like black sludge algae. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's disgusting, and it plugs up the fuel filters, and this stuff just helps keep it clean, keeps the injectors lubricated. The motor is a whole nother piece to this that is obviously extremely important, and the motor itself, inside of it, contains thousands of little pieces that all need to operate on their own. This just helps give each of those little pieces some lubrication, so we try to do this whenever we remember to. All right, 2 hatches down. Each one of these hatches like a magical door to problems. If you're ever bored one day and you own a boat, just open up a hatch and take a peek under there, and you'll find something screaming at you saying, hey, I need some attention. So let's move on to this hatch and see what we got for problems to deal with today. Under this hatch is probably one of the most important parts of the boat. This is actually a pretty cool hatch we made. I haven't seen many boats with these, but it's a hatch and a sprinkler system. So you can see we can plug a hose in right there, a washdown hose, We can fill this tank with lobsters, with crates. We can set this hatch right on top of it, and the sprinkler system runs through this aluminum tube. And the water shoots out of these holes and sprinkles water down over the lobsters. So it's a pretty handy rig. Trouble is we don't want to spray too much water down here right now because there's a giant hole in the bottom of the boat. Under this hatch you can see is our lobster tank. This is where we store the lobsters, and we should have had it hooked up all winter so we weren't dealing with the barrels. We've been trying to keep the lobsters alive on deck with the barrels the past few days that we hauled because it was extremely cold and we didn't have a lobster tank set up. This tank alleviates having to deal with the barrels because the barrels just overflow. They're not practical. They run water all over the deck. There's water leaking in all the hatches all day. We're actually going to seal it back up. You can see this gigantic hole in the bottom of the boat. It's just an access hatch to one of the most important pieces of the boat, and this is the stuffing box. Similar to the box in the back for the rudder shaft, this is what allows the shaft for the propeller to be able to come through the hull without leaking. Same idea, it's just got a big nut with packing inside of it. You tighten the nut and it squeezes the packing up against the shaft and doesn't allow water to leak through. So usually when we're down here, I just inspect and make sure that the nuts are tight and there's nothing dripping underneath here. We're actually gonna silicone this back down right now. Let's just get some silicone and some screws so that way we can use this box. Time for the next one. Down the next hatch is an extremely important part of the boat. This part also helps keep you from sinking, which is good. This is the exhaust. Actually, the water that I was talking about earlier that drains out through the motor in the impeller runs through this. It's called a wet exhaust system instead of dry. It has water running through it to help keep the exhaust cool, and it's built out of several different pieces of fiberglass connected together with rubber boots. These rubber boots are connected together with hose clamps. So essentially the whole exhaust system is held together with a handful of $5 hose clamps. If these hose clamps fail and one of these boots start leaking, the water that the motor is pumping out will start running under the floor. It will start filling the boat full of water. And a lot of the times when you hear of a boat sinking, this is actually what caused it. I know of a few that sank due to exhaust leaks under the floor, but we're looking pretty good. All right, moving on up towards the front of the boat, we got the pod hauler. The pod hauler is held together with these stainless steel bolts. They might be $2 or $3 in today's economy, but nonetheless, they are cheap bolts that hold this whole operation together. So you bolts, you keep holding strong. These will actually break off. Some of my haulers previously had smaller bolts in them, and they're a headache because they break off frequently. Also, this is the fair lead. This wears out over time if you don't keep it greased. I usually try to keep this greased, especially in the wintertime hauling in the deeper water. Pretty critical because it helps keep the rope in the hauler. It turns and the rope comes through this block underneath the fair lead and then into the hauler, and this gives the rope a little lower angle of attack into the pod hauler and gives a little bit more bite in the hauler. So when a knot comes through, it doesn't pop out quite as easily. Moving on into the wheelhouse, we have a lot of important stuff in here, primarily the electronics. We got VHFs, which obviously we need to call for help if we ever get in trouble, or we use them to talk and aggravate each other on the radio, which is most frequently what they're used for. We have a lot of fun aggravating each other throughout the days to help lighten the days, especially the monotonous days. When the fishing's good, the radio gets pretty quiet, but when the fishing is poor, it's pretty entertaining to listen to Channel 12 on the VHF. If you're ever in Maine, tune into Channel 12 while you're traveling up and down the coast. You can get a little handheld VHF, and there's times it's pretty entertaining. I don't know if I'd have your kids listen to it, but it's entertaining. So this is the radar, and this helps us get around when it's foggy and when it's nighttime. When the visibility is low, this allows us to see other boats and see land. This is very crucial to the safety of the operation of the whole business. Without it, we're lost. Right next to the radar is also the chart plotter and the computer system that helps keep track of the 800 traps that are in the water. A lot of people ask that. How do we keep track of so many different traps in the water? And it is with the assistance of GPS that we keep track of it. We can do it without it to an extent, but it's a lot more difficult and it slows the day down a lot. If these break, I have got through many days with broken electronics having to try to find the gear without them, but it slows the day down a lot. Everything is hauled much more precise when the electronics are working correctly, and we can get the traps back down where they belong on bottom without tangling up with our other fishermen that are near us. So these are a very critical, important to ensuring a smooth workflow and getting our gear up off bottom and smoothly getting them back out. Hauling without these sucks. So while they're not essential, they are very important. And they're also very expensive. The computer's probably $4,000 or $5,000 in the computer. And also all these electronics that are so important to us all run off of little fuses over there in the corner and wires that are maybe 50-cent fuses. It's kind of funny when you think about it that way. That's why we carry spare fuses. Oh, and the autopilot here is my baby, my darling, my co-pilot. This is who runs the boat most of the time. This is the actual captain of the boat. I'm just along for the ride. Right next to it, we got the controls, which are important. Gets the boat into gear, into reverse, the throttle, and those are all run off of little cables down underneath it here. Those controls up top are pretty expensive actually. So are the cables, but when you look at the job that they have, they are extremely important. These chintzy little cables are what put us in and out of gear and what control the throttle, and ultimately one piece of this big puzzle that keeps the whole operation going. Into the hydraulic room is once again a bunch of hoses, hydraulics, fittings, control cables, all kinds of stuff. Small, cheap pieces on their own, but when you put them all together, they are an important piece to what makes all of this work and what brings lobsters to your dinner table. Oh, and then if you ask Tristan, here's the most important part of the boat down here, the bunks, where they can get their precious beauty sleep or whatever they do down here.
That's a fault. It's the most important part right there.
What's that? Oh, that microwave. That's true, yeah. The microwave is probably the most important part of the boat. Yeah, that is the MVP. I don't know how I went years without a microwave, but now that I've got it, it's like an autopilot. Now it's a necessity. The Westmac is going to have some nice kitchen stuff. I'm even thinking I'll go as far as to put a mini fridge in it. I think that would be pretty nice in the summertime to have some nice cold drinks when we're pogie fishing.
Deer meat, halibut flanks, just caught fresh and put on.
I have some big pipe dreams for the Westmac, thinking it would be so fun to take it like down south in the wintertime when we're not busy up here, take the traps up and go down towards like the Carolinas or Florida, East Coast, and do some fishing down there in the wintertime in the Westmac. I want to set the new boat up with those comfortable, what are they called? Not necessities, the opposite of necessities. Those comfortable amenities that aren't really requirements to getting the job done, but they'd be comfortable on a trip like that if we decide to do that. Bermuda would be cool. It's not that far away.
Oh, that'd be a cool one.
That would be an awesome place to go spend the winter and do some fishing. Fish all the way down, have freezers in the boat. We could fill the freezers full of halibut, tuna fish, and deer meat in the fall. We could run all the way down.
Harvest it all ourselves.
Yeah, we could eat tuna, halibut, deer meat all winter down there. And then before we leave down there to come up, we could be full of swordfish, mahi-mahi, grouper. We could have the freezers full of them, and then we could make the trip back up in the spring, come back up for lobster fishing. I think it sounds like an awesome idea. And that's why a lot of those fancy, unnecessary amenities are going in the Westmac. It's still kind of a pipe dream at this point, but we'll see. Back down the hatch that we started the day in. This is an expensive hole that can really test your patience. So down here, of course, is where the motor is, belts, pulleys. This is the clutch that runs the pot hauler. This is the hydraulic pump on the front of the motor, the clutch that runs it. So when that hauler's turning, this is where the power is coming from. The list goes on and on. Fuel filters. How did I almost forget the most important piece back here? The batteries. We're not going anywhere without batteries. That's the other end of the exhaust system back there where it comes out of the back of the motor. There is the belt-driven water pump that keeps all the lobsters alive. Without that, we're out of business. So that little $15 belt is ultimately what keeps the operation going. Along with the alternator, along with just about every other thing you see down here. It's a miracle that this all works. When you break it down and look at it in this perspective and how many little pieces there are that all have to work for this to work. Oh, how did I almost forget the steering wheel? Of course, we got to be able to steer. This is a hydraulic helm. On the back side of this is a bunch of hydraulic hoses, once again fittings, that all run off that hydraulic pump. They're what get the boat around and steer us throughout the day. So I could go on and on, really, about the amount of little items in here. Most of them are $5, $10. Some of them are $200, $300. Some of them are $2,000 or $3,000. Some of them are underneath me are $60,000, $70,000. So there's quite a vast array of different parts on this boat, some big, some small, that keep the operation all going. I thought I'd take the day to give you a little behind the scenes action of what goes in to making not only these videos possible for you, but our livelihood possible. There's so much that goes into it that these videos don't really show very well. I shouldn't even say this, but fortunately we haven't had any major breakdowns for a little while. I don't know why I just said that out loud. Usually when we don't have a lot of breakdowns for an extended period of time is when I start to get nervous. That's usually not a good sign when nothing's breaking. Usually you want a few things breaking here and there as you're going. If you go too long without breakdowns, it's not really good because then everything's just gonna break at once. I'm about ready to put my boat for sale. Good job, Jacob. That was good. Good sales pitch. Yeah, just kidding. Everything's been breaking. I just fixed everything. It's all mint. This was just the first half of the day off. Boat maintenance. Now it's boat preparation. We're gonna get some bait ready. We'll have that for you next weekend. So until then, get off my boat!